The rain hammered Highway 78 like bullets on steel. Michael Carter gripped the wheel, his 7-year-old daughter's emergency call from summer camp still echoing. "Daddy, I'm scared. They said I need to go to the hospital right now." Then he saw her standing in the storm, a woman in what used to be a wedding dress. The white silk hung in shredded ribbons from her shoulders, torn so violently it looked like she'd crawled through barbed wire. Dark stains, definitely not mud, spread across the fabric like spilled secrets. She stood barefoot on the shoulder, one broken heel dangling from bloodied fingers, mascara streaming down hollow cheeks as she waved frantically at passing cars. Every single vehicle sped past this bride from a nightmare. Michael's foot hit the brake before his mind caught up. She stumbled toward his truck, her torn dress trailing behind like broken wings. When she reached his window, her green eyes locked onto his with desperate recognition that made his blood freeze. "You have to get me to Piedmont Hospital right now," she whispered through the storm. "Zoe Carter needs you." Michael stared at the stranger, who somehow knew his daughter's name. Michael's hand froze on the door handle. The rain drummed against the windshield as his mind raced through impossible scenarios. How could this woman know about Zoe? His daughter was at summer camp 40 miles away in Alpharetta. The call had come 20 minutes ago from a counselor who spoke in hushed, urgent tones about an accident and blood tests and please come immediately. Michael's chest tightened as he studied the woman's face through the streaked glass. Her green eyes held a desperation that seemed to burn through the storm itself. "Who are you?" His voice cracked as he rolled down the window. Water immediately soaked his arm, but he barely noticed. The woman's lips were blue with cold, her torn wedding dress clinging to her shivering frame. She clutched something small and metallic in her bloodied palm, a USB drive that caught the truck's headlights for just a moment before she closed her fist around it. "My name is Helena Cross." She leaned closer, rainwater dripping from her chin. "I'm a pediatric doctor at Piedmont. Your daughter is in my care, and there are things about her condition you need to know immediately." Her voice carried an authority that cut through his panic, but something felt wrong. Doctors didn't abandon their posts to flag down random cars on highways during storms. Michael glanced at his phone lying on the passenger seat. No missed calls from the hospital, no updates about Zoe's condition. The last message was from the camp counselor 2 hours ago. "Don't worry, Mr. Carter. We're taking good care of her." He looked back at Helena, whose eyes had followed his gaze to the phone. A shadow crossed her face. Fear, or was it guilt? "Get in," he said, though every instinct screamed against it. "But I'm calling the hospital while we drive." Helena nodded and hurried around to the passenger side, her torn dress making wet slapping sounds against her legs. As she climbed in, Michael caught the scent of expensive perfume mixed with something metallic. Blood, he realized. Fresh blood that hadn't been washed away by the rain. Helena settled into the passenger seat, her breathing shallow and quick. She kept glancing at the side mirrors as Michael pulled back onto the highway, her fingers still wrapped tightly around the USB drive. The torn wedding dress revealed a small bandage on her upper arm, and Michael noticed her wrist bore the kind of hospital bracelet patients wear. But it wasn't from Piedmont. The logo was different, unfamiliar. "What happened to you?" Michael asked, pressing harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed past 70 as they raced through the storm toward Atlanta. "Why are you out here in a wedding dress?" Helena's jaw tightened, and she turned to stare out at the darkness rushing past them. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating her profile for brief, stark moments. "I was supposed to marry Alexander Whitman tonight," she said finally. "CEO of Novacorp Pharmaceuticals. But I discovered something during the reception that changed everything." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Your daughter, Michael, she's not at summer camp because of an accident. She's there because someone has been monitoring her health for months, waiting for specific symptoms to appear." Michael's blood turned to ice. His grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles went white. "What are you talking about? Monitoring her for what?" But Helena had turned back to the window, her lips pressed into a thin line. In the distance, the lights of Atlanta began to emerge through the storm, but Michael felt as though he was driving deeper into darkness with each passing mile. The hospital loomed ahead like a fortress of glass and steel, its emergency entrance blazing with fluorescent light. Michael barely remembered parking or walking through the automatic doors with Helena beside him, her torn dress leaving a trail of rainwater across the polished floor. The smell of antiseptic hit him immediately, sharp and clean, but underneath it lingered something else. The metallic scent of fear that seemed to follow Helena like a shadow. "Mr. Carter." A nurse approached them, her eyes widening as she took in Helena's appearance. "We've been expecting you. Your daughter is stable, but Dr. Richardson wants to speak with you immediately." The nurse's gaze shifted to Helena, recognition flickering across her features. "Dr. Cross? I thought you were—" Helena cut her off with a sharp shake of her head, and the nurse fell silent, confusion clouding her expression. They followed the nurse through a maze of corridors, past rooms filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the hushed conversations of medical staff. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs as they approached a door marked Pediatric Intensive Care. Through the window he could see Zoe lying small and pale in a hospital bed, IV lines snaking from her tiny arms. Her eyes were closed, dark lashes stark against her colorless cheeks. "She's been having episodes for the past 6 months," Dr. Richardson explained as they entered the room. He was a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, but his expression was grave. Fatigue, mild fevers, headaches. The camp counselors brought her in when she collapsed during morning activities. "We're running comprehensive blood work, but the preliminary results are concerning." The doctor's gaze shifted between Michael and Helena, questions forming in his eyes. Helena stepped forward, her torn dress rustling softly. "Doctor, I need to see her chart immediately. There are factors about Zoe's medical history that haven't been disclosed." Her voice carried professional authority, despite her disheveled appearance. Dr. Richardson hesitated, clearly recognizing Helena, but uncertain about protocol. "This is highly irregular, Dr. Cross. You're not assigned to this case, and frankly, your current state raises some questions." Michael moved to Zoe's bedside, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch her forehead. Her skin felt too warm, and her breathing seemed labored. "What factors?" he demanded, turning back to Helena. "What aren't you telling me about my daughter?" Helena's eyes met his across the hospital bed, and in them he saw a pain so deep it made his chest ache. She opened her palm, revealing the USB drive she'd been clutching since he picked her up. "2 years ago, your wife Carmen participated in an experimental cancer treatment," Helena said quietly. "The drug was called Genitex, manufactured by Novacorp. It was supposed to target cancer cells without affecting healthy tissue, but the trials were rushed. The long-term effects weren't properly studied." Her voice broke slightly. "The drug doesn't just treat cancer, Michael. It alters genetic material in ways we're only beginning to understand." The room seemed to spin around Michael as the implications crashed over him. Carmen had died 2 years ago, her cancer returning with a vengeance, despite the experimental treatment she'd been so hopeful about. She'd signed up for the trial when Zoe was 5, desperate to beat the disease that threatened to take her away from her family. "You're saying the drug Carmen took is affecting Zoe now?" His voice sounded hollow, distant. Dr. Richardson stepped closer, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Dr. Cross, these are serious allegations. If you have evidence of genetic mutations caused by pharmaceutical interventions, this becomes a matter for the CDC and the FDA." Helena nodded grimly, holding up the USB drive. "This contains research data from 47 families whose children are exhibiting similar symptoms, All of their parents participated in Genetech's trials between 2 and 3 years ago. Michael sank into the chair beside Zoe's bed, his world tilting on its axis. Everything he thought he knew about his daughter's recent health problems suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. The fatigue, the fevers, the headaches. They weren't random childhood illnesses. They were symptoms of genetic damage caused by a drug that was supposed to save Carmen's life. His hands shook as he reached out to stroke Zoe's hair, so soft and fine, just like her mother's had been. "Why now?" he whispered. "Why are you telling me this now? Tonight, in a torn wedding dress?" Helena's green eyes filled with tears, and she pressed her lips together before answering. "Because tonight was supposed to be my wedding to Alexander Whitman, the CEO who authorized the cover-up. I've been working undercover for 6 months, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to expose everything. But when I saw Zoe's name on the patient list tonight..." Her voice trailed off as footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Helena's head snapped toward the door, her body tensing like a deer sensing predators. "They know I took the data," she breathed. "We don't have much time." Through the window, Michael could see men in dark suits moving through the hospital corridors, their faces hard and purposeful. Security badges gleamed on their jackets, but something about them seemed wrong, too aggressive, too focused. Dr. Richardson grabbed the phone on the wall, his fingers flying over the numbers. "Security, this is Dr. Richardson in Pediatric ICU. We have unauthorized personnel approaching my location." But before he could finish the call, the line went dead. The lights in the room flickered once, twice, then steadied. Helena was already moving, disconnecting Zoe's IV lines with practiced efficiency. "We have to go. Now." Helena's training took over as she began preparing Zoe for transport. "There's a service elevator at the end of this corridor. It connects to the parking garage." Michael stood frozen, watching this woman he'd known for less than 2 hours take charge of his daughter's life. Every parental instinct told him to trust the doctors, to stay in the safety of the hospital, but the approaching footsteps and Helena's obvious terror suggested safety was an illusion. Zoe's eyes fluttered open as Helena lifted her from the bed. "Daddy?" Her voice was small and confused, and Michael's heart nearly broke at the trust in her expression. "It's okay, sweetheart," he managed. "We're going for a little ride." Helena wrapped Zoe in a hospital blanket and moved toward the door, checking the corridor before stepping out. The men in suits were closer now, their voices carrying an urgency that made Michael's skin crawl. They moved quickly down the hallway, Helena supporting most of Zoe's weight, while Michael stayed close beside them. The service elevator stood open at the end of the corridor, its interior stark and utilitarian. As they stepped inside, Michael could hear raised voices from the direction of Zoe's room. Dr. Richardson was arguing with someone, his tone growing more heated by the second. The elevator descended with agonizing slowness, each floor marked by a soft ding that seemed to echo through Michael's bones. Helena held Zoe close, murmuring reassurances in a voice that was surprisingly gentle for someone who had just fled her own wedding. "You're very brave, Zoe," she said softly. "Your daddy and I are going to take very good care of you." Zoe nodded weakly, her small hand reaching out to grasp Michael's fingers. The parking garage was dimly lit and nearly empty, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls as they hurried toward Michael's truck. The storm had intensified while they were inside, rain hammering against the garage's open sides and sending spray across the floor. As Michael fumbled with his keys, Helena kept looking over her shoulder, her whole body radiating tension. "Where are we going?" Michael asked as they climbed into the truck. Zoe lay across the back seat, the hospital blanket tucked around her small form. Helena plugged the USB drive into her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as data scrolled past. "There's a research facility in Marietta," she said without looking up. "Independent lab, not connected to any pharmaceutical companies. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison runs it. She's been investigating genetic mutations in children for years. Michael started the engine and pulled out of the garage, the truck's headlights cutting through sheets of rain. As they reached the street, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw dark sedans emerging from the hospital parking area. Their headlights swept across the road like searchlights, and Michael pressed harder on the accelerator. "They're following us," he said, his voice tight with fear. Helena looked back and cursed under her breath. "Take the next exit," she instructed. "We need to lose them before we go to Dr. Morrison's lab." Michael swerved onto the off-ramp, tires squealing on the wet pavement. Behind them, the sedans followed, their high-powered engines roaring as they tried to close the distance. The truck's speedometer climbed past 80 as they raced through empty suburban streets. "Daddy, I'm scared!" Zoe's voice from the back seat cut through Michael's concentration like a knife. He could see her pale face in the rear-view mirror, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "It's going to be okay, baby," he promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Helena reached back to take Zoe's hand, her torn wedding dress rustling in the cramped cab. "Tell me about school, Zoe," Helena said, her voice calm despite their desperate situation. "What's your favorite subject?" As Zoe began to talk about her art class, Helena's professional demeanor took over. She was checking the child's pulse, observing her breathing, making mental notes about her condition. Michael found himself grateful for this stranger's presence, even as questions about her true motives gnawed at his mind. They turned onto a narrow road that wound through a wooded area, the truck's headlights illuminating rain-soaked trees that seemed to lean in from both sides. The sedans had fallen back, their lights visible, but distant. "There," Helena pointed ahead to a small building nestled among the trees. A discreet sign read, "Morrison Research Institute." Most of the windows were dark, but a single light glowed in what appeared to be a laboratory on the second floor. Dr. Morrison met them at the door before they could even knock. She was a woman in her 50s, with short grey hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Helena called ahead," she said simply, ushering them inside. "Bring the child upstairs immediately." The building smelled of chemicals and antiseptic, but unlike the hospital, it felt safe somehow. Personal touches, family photos, potted plants, classical music playing softly, made it feel more like a home than a sterile medical facility. The laboratory was a maze of sophisticated equipment, computer monitors glowing with complex data patterns. Dr. Morrison guided them to an examination area where she began checking Zoe's vital signs with gentle efficiency. "Genetic markers are definitely present," she murmured, studying readouts on her computer screen. "But the pattern is unusual. It's almost as if the mutations are designed to activate at a specific developmental stage." Helena looked up sharply from where she'd been downloading data from the USB drive. "Designed?" Dr. Morrison nodded grimly. "This isn't random genetic damage from a flawed drug. These changes were deliberately programmed into the Genotex formula. The question is why?" Michael felt his legs go weak. He sank into a nearby chair, his mind struggling to process the implications. Someone had intentionally altered Carmen's DNA in a way that would affect their daughter years later. "We've been monitoring 47 children across 6 states," Dr. Morrison continued, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "All showing similar symptoms, all with parents who participated in Genotex trials. But Zoe is different. Her genetic markers are more complex, more refined. It's as if she was specifically targeted for enhanced modification." The words hit Michael like physical blows. His daughter wasn't just a victim of corporate negligence. She was part of some deliberate experiment. Helena moved to the window, her face pale in the reflected light from the computer screens. "Alexander suspected I was investigating him," she said quietly. Tonight at the reception, he proposed a toast to the next generation of medical breakthroughs. When I asked what he meant, he smiled and said, "I'd understand soon enough." That's when I knew I had to run. Her hands trembled as she touched the torn fabric of her wedding dress. Dr. Morrison pulled up a complex chart on her monitor, lines of genetic code scrolling past in endless streams. According to this data, the children affected by Genetech aren't dying from the mutations. She said, "They're evolving. Their immune systems, their neural pathways, their cellular regeneration, everything is being enhanced. But the process is unstable. Without intervention, the enhanced genetics will burn out their bodies within months." Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're telling me my daughter is part of some kind of genetic experiment? That her mother's cancer treatment was really a way to alter our child's DNA?" His voice rose with each word, anger and fear warring in his chest. "And now she's going to die because of it." Dr. Morrison's expression was compassionate, but honest. "Without treatment, yes. But Helena's data might give us what we need to stabilize the process." Zoe stirred on the examination table, her eyes opening to focus on the adults surrounding her. "Am I sick like Mommy was?" she asked in a small voice. Michael moved to her side immediately, taking her hand in his. "No, sweetheart. You're going to be fine. These doctors are going to help you." But even as he spoke the words, he could see the doubt in Zoe's eyes. She was only 7, but she understood more than he wanted to admit. Helena approached the examination table, her torn wedding dress making her look like a fallen angel. "Zoe, I need to ask you something important," she said gently. "Have you been having strange dreams lately? Dreams about flying or moving very fast?" Zoe nodded slowly. "Sometimes I dream I can hear people's thoughts," she whispered. "And once I made my pencil move without touching it, but I thought I imagined it." Dr. Morrison exchanged a significant look with Helena. "Enhanced neural connectivity," she murmured. "The genetic modifications are affecting her brain development as well as her immune system. This is far more advanced than anything we've seen in the other children." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. His daughter wasn't just sick. She was becoming something else entirely, something the people who had killed her mother had planned from the beginning. A soft chime from Dr. Morrison's computer drew their attention. New data was streaming in from monitoring stations around the country. "The other children," Dr. Morrison said, her voice filled with alarm. "They're going into crisis simultaneously. Whatever Novacorp did to trigger Zoe's symptoms, they've activated it in all 47 subjects." Helena cursed and moved to another terminal, her fingers flying over the keys as she tried to access more data. "It's a field test," Helena said, her voice hollow with realization. "They've been waiting for the children to reach the optimal age, and now they're collecting data on how the enhanced genetics manifest under stress. We're not just dealing with a cover-up. We're in the middle of an active experiment on children." Michael's vision blurred with rage. These people had turned his daughter into a test subject, and now they were deliberately making her sick to see what would happen. Dr. Morrison was already preparing a treatment protocol, her movements quick and efficient. "I can synthesize a stabilizing agent from Helena's data," she said. "It won't reverse the genetic modifications, but it should prevent the burnout effect. The enhanced abilities will remain, but they'll be controllable and safe." She paused, meeting Michael's eyes directly. "However, once we treat Zoe, Novacorp will know we have their data. They'll come after all of us." Michael looked down at his daughter's pale face, then at Helena, standing in her torn wedding dress, and finally at Dr. Morrison, who was risking her career and possibly her life to help them. "Do it," he said firmly. "I don't care what happens to me, but Zoe gets the treatment." Helena nodded, moving to assist Dr. Morrison with the preparation. "There's enough data here to treat all 47 children," she said. "We can save them all." The treatment took 3 hours to prepare and another 2 to administer. Michael stayed by Zoe's side the entire time, watching color slowly return to her cheeks as the stabilizing agent worked through her system. Helena and Dr. Morrison worked tirelessly, synthesizing doses for the other affected children and preparing data packages to send to pediatric specialists around the country. As dawn broke through the laboratory windows, they had enough treatment to save every child targeted by Novacorp's experiment. "How do you feel, sweetheart?" Michael asked, as Zoe sat up on the examination table. Her eyes were brighter than they'd been in months, and she moved with an energy that had been missing for so long. "Better," she said simply. Then, with a small smile, she added, "I can still hear your thoughts a little bit, Daddy. You're worried about the bad men coming to find us." Michael's heart skipped a beat, but Dr. Morrison just smiled. "That's perfectly normal," she assured him. "The enhanced abilities are stable now. Zoe will learn to control them as she grows." Helena finished uploading the treatment data to a secure server that would distribute it to medical facilities worldwide. "It's done," she said, finally allowing exhaustion to show in her voice. "Every child affected by Genotex will receive treatment within 48 hours. Novacorp's experiment is over." She looked down at her torn wedding dress and laughed bitterly. "I was supposed to be honeymooning in Paris right now." Morrison handed Michael a vial of medication. "Zoe will need 1 dose of this every 6 months until she turns 18, she explained. "By then, her enhanced genetics will be fully integrated and stable. She'll have abilities beyond normal human parameters, but she'll be completely healthy." Michael pocketed the vial carefully, his mind already planning how to keep his daughter safe from people who might want to exploit her new capabilities. "What happens now?" Michael asked. Helena moved to the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Now we disappear," she said simply. "Novacorp will be shut down within weeks once this data goes public, but the people responsible will try to cover their tracks. We need to stay hidden until the legal system catches up." She turned back to face them, her green eyes determined despite her exhaustion. Dr. Morrison was already making preparations for their departure. "I have a colleague in Montana who runs a private clinic," she said. "You'll be safe there while the investigation unfolds. The children affected by this experiment will need ongoing monitoring, and there will be others who want to study their enhanced abilities for less benevolent purposes." Michael nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. Zoe's new capabilities made her both precious and dangerous. 6 months later, Michael and Zoe lived in a small cabin outside Billings, Montana, where she attended a special school for children with unusual abilities. Helena had opened a research clinic nearby, dedicating her life to helping the 47 children whose lives had been forever changed by Novacorp's experiments. The pharmaceutical company had been dissolved amid criminal investigations, but Alexander Whitman had disappeared before authorities could arrest him. On quiet evenings, Michael would sit on the cabin's porch and watch Zoe play in the yard, her laughter carrying on the mountain air as she used her enhanced abilities to make wildflowers dance without touching them. Helena often joined them for dinner, her torn wedding dress long since replaced by simple clothes that suited her new life. She never spoke about the future she'd given up, but sometimes Michael caught her looking at him and Zoe with an expression that suggested she'd found something better than the life she'd planned. The other children thrived as well, their enhanced genetics stabilized and their abilities growing stronger under careful supervision. They formed a unique community, connected by their shared experience and bound by the understanding that they were the first of something new. Dr. Morrison continued her research, working to understand the full implications of what Novacorp had done, and preparing for the day when these children would take their place in a world that wasn't quite ready for them. Michael's truck sat in the cabin's driveway, the same vehicle that had stopped on a rainy highway 8 months earlier to pick up a desperate woman in a torn wedding dress. Sometimes he wondered what would have happened if he'd driven past Helena that night, if he'd chosen his own safety over helping a stranger. But watching Zoe demonstrate her extraordinary abilities to a visiting child, seeing the joy and wonder in her eyes as she embraced what she was becoming, he knew he'd made the right choice. The torn wedding dress had been framed and hung in Helena's clinic, not as a reminder of what she'd lost, but as a symbol of what could be gained when someone was brave enough to walk away from a life built on lies. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "From endings come beginnings." It served as inspiration for the children who came to understand their enhanced abilities, and for the adults who had chosen to protect them no matter the cost. As the sun set behind the Montana mountains, casting long shadows across the valley where their new life had taken root, Michael reflected on the chain of events that had brought them here. A desperate phone call, a woman in a torn wedding dress, a choice to stop and help a stranger. All of it had led to this moment of peace and possibility. Sometimes the most important decisions were made in split seconds on rain-soaked highways, when ordinary people chose to be extraordinary for someone they'd never met before.